Did you know that in patch 15 you can get the SVD to shoot like this with literally 2 attachments? This is of course the Bipod, which I'll show you how to fit in a moment, and while this tends to be a bit of a gimmick most of the time, the SVD is probably one of the strongest guns to use it with, at least in theory. The SVD is technically a Prapor 3 purchase, but being allowed on the flea market, you can get this much earlier on. With its high base price of around 90,000 rubles, this means that you don't often save much by going to the trader directly and can buy them cheaper from the marketplace, albeit with a durability disadvantage most of the time. Given that the gun is semi-auto, you can usually get away with something in the low 90s or the high 80s once repaired for durability if the price spread is really quite wide, but anything less than this and you really are starting to risk a jam when using it. Typically, if I'm kitting it out completely, then I will always buy a 100 durability version, but if you are looking to make a budget shooter, then some of these lower down ones can kind of be alright. So here we have our basic SVD. This is the equivalent that you probably will be buying off the flea market. It's the Prapor default, so something from the flea will look similar to this. Now, the trick to mounting the SVD Bipod is not anything to do with handguards or anything like that. It does depend on the gun, but for the SVD, you need to go onto this little mount here, which attaches to the barrel, and use this, the DRG L1 barrel mount rail. If you stick that on, that then allows you to add all sorts of stuff, but the most important one is this, the B10. The B10 V8 Atlas Bipod. So when you've got this on, this then obviously allows you to use the Bipod itself, and this is compatible with basically any SVD build. Every single SVD build will allow you to add this DRG part, which will then allow you to add the B10. So it doesn't actually matter how you mod the rest of the gun, you can get this B10 on here. If you actually want to do the most basic build possible, then you literally can just go and add, say, a PSO1 on the side, and that's it. And if you're using the Bipod properly, then this will be extremely effective. Now, obviously, this is a very, very cheap gun. The SVD is expensive, but the rest of the parts is not very much. And even though this B10 thing is mechanic 3 and the DRG L1 is mechanic 2, you'll see here, we were talking about the flea previously. These, normally they're on the flea market for just about the same price as the actual part itself. I might even put some up myself just to, help out somebody else to go and build this weapon. But when I was last looking earlier, there was usually some there. So if you're thinking about running the SVD, you might just want to, grab a few there. And then you've got the Bipod as well, which is on mechanic 3. Now this one is flipped a little bit more than the other one, just because the other part's very specialized, whereas this goes on to basically every gun that supports it can use this V8 Bipod. And these are 8.5k on mechanic 3, but then they're like 14,000, 15,000 on the flea market. So they're really not that much. So we're talking, between 20k or something, and you can get the parts for the SVD to just build this, and then you add on some scope, like a PSO maybe, which is 20,000 rubles. I think I bought mine for 10 actually when I was looking at this earlier, because they're so cheap on the flea market compared to the trader. And you could just use this gun. This gun is honestly fine. This is actually ready to go. And especially if you're going to do some Bipod gaming, which we'll talk about in a little bit, then you can actually make this work. So if you want to mod the gun a bit further, which is what I usually do, by the time you're at this quest, normally you've got level 3 traders and you can do a bit more with the SVD, then you've really got 2 choices. The standard configuration that it comes with is the SVDS upper band version, and this one is the one that allows you to change over the handguard to either the budget XRS DRG, which you basically only use if you're trying to spend as little as possible, or the SVD modernization kit. So I call this the Modernized SVD, and it's basically an upgrade of the stock one. So we've got SVD Modernized here. You've then got the regular foregrips and other stuff underneath. So we're going to put on whatever here. I'm going to use an SI Cobra. I'm going to try and focus on ergonomics. And then on this side one, there's a part that kind of sits in the middle of the gun. And this is the SVD Modernized top rail kit. And that means you don't need to faff about with any of these side mounted parts, and you can just put optics right on the back. From here, we've got the pistol grips. This you can change over to the PSVD adapter. When you stick that on, that then opens up basically all the ones that you usually know and love. The best one here is the AGS 74. I normally use the saw grip just because it's kind of best bang for buck. It's only one less than the RK311 rather than 12. And so for mid-game builds, I usually just run the saw. In terms of stocks, now typically what I do with these is use the SVDS adapter, because then that unlocks all of the other stocks. And I tend to run my SVDs for ergonomics, because I tend to use them as kind of like assault SVDs rather than sniping SVDs. This really depends on how you want to do this. And I end up using the Viper PDW a lot. You can technically also use the M7A1, but you lose about 3 ergonomics doing it. So the Viper is usually a little bit better. And then from here, you could just stick on whatever optic and any sort of flashlight or tactical device that you want to here. And as you can see, you get 58.5 ergonomics and 132 vertical recoil, which this is a lot, but with the Bipod, it goes down to almost nothing. And 132 versus the best builds that you can make, which is I think 92 for the absolute cutting edge best recoil build. It's not that bad given that this is on semi-automatic and fires absolutely massive bullets. We will talk about the 20 rounders later, so I'll stick that on, but it doesn't make that much difference. It's only 1 ergo difference between the 10 rounders and the 20s, so you should probably use that. And then the favorite optic that I tend to use for this is the Nightforce 30mm, because it's just nice and neat and one of the lowest that you can get. And then I like this thing, the Schmidt & Bender 1:8, and I like this because you can use the variable zoom on it, which is pretty neat, and you've got all the way up to 8 times, which is good. And I really like the way that the reticle looks as well. The actual optic is super clean, and they're pretty cheap on the flea, like under 50k normally for these things, just under half the price of something like the Voodoo or the Razor. Another option, which is not too bad, is the Tango 6T. This one's usually quite cheap as well, 60k. It's another one that looks quite good. It looks a bit like the Bravo in terms of the little ring and the dot inside, and that's another one that's variable too. Classically, obviously got the TAC 30 as well, which only goes out to 4 times and is pretty cheap. And then you've got the usual ones, the Voodoo and the Razor, which are normally the most expensive. The Razor's usually the priciest, 85k here, and the Voodoo is usually about the same price, maybe slightly cheaper, like 70k. So it's really up to you which one you use. I do like the Schmidt & Bender though. I think it's pretty good, and especially on the SVD. The only thing I'll say about this build and doing it in this particular way is that when you are using a suppressor, it's impossible to avoid overswing while using a suppressor on the SVD. So I typically run it unsuppressed, but I use the other builds. So if you're going to go suppressed, then generally speaking, I would rather use this one, this SVD Modernized kit, and then add the suppressor on here, and then add the 762x54R suppressor on top. Now you will get overswing with this regardless of what you do here, which is kind of unfortunate. So in that circumstance, this makes this one much more of a sniper build, and so you may want to just optimize for recoil on this one instead. So you could swap over the Viper stock and change that over to whatever you've got access to. If you've got level 4 traders, then the ARE. If you don't have access to that, then you might want to buy the ATP, because it's kind of a good middle ground on skier. And then you can add on whatever you like, really. The PRS Gen 3 does lose a lot of ergonomics in general. You could go for something kind of middle ground, like one of the MOEs, and on that just stick a buck pad or something if you've done the level of gunsmith for it. If not, the best bang for buck is the DS150, the Chris Defiance stock, because that one is 1 worse on recoil and 1 worse on ergonomics than the MOE combo, so that one's usually pretty good as well. So it's really up to you. Now this would get you to 20 ergo and 103 recoil. This is getting down to levels that are actually pretty decent. You could also swap the Cobra out if you wanted to, maybe for an RVG Black, and that would get you down to 100 recoil. You're getting pretty close to the lowest recoil that you can get with this build, and I think that that is pretty good. Now if you don't want to go suppressed, and I often don't go suppressed with the SVD because it means that you can avoid having that overswing, but you do need to play it in a different way, and on that way you're going to have to change the whole build completely. So this is the alternate build and is the SAG Mark1 build. What you have to do for this, I'm actually going to remove the whole upper band section and just get rid of most of the gun. That also means that you need to get rid of the cover as well, because the SAG Mark1 requires the custom cut dust cover on top, otherwise it won't work because it's got this special section in here. And rather than having the SVDS upper band, you've got this instead, the SAG Mark1 chassis. So when we put that on, because this is key mod, this allows you to use this foregrip that you can't use on that many handguards actually, which is the A3 Tactical. And this is only ergonomics, but that's kind of what I'm looking for with this particular build. So I'm going to put that on here. I'm going to remove the thread adapter. I'm going to leave on the compensator, but we're just going to get rid of the suppressor. We can get rid of the front sight as well. And then at the back, I'm going to actually re-add on the Viper because you kind of need to for this build to avoid the overswing. Even with all of the stuff that we're going to do to this, you're actually only just over the threshold. From here, we can still add the same optics, the Nightforce and then the Schmidt & Bender, that would work. And then in terms of tactical devices, then I usually use the WMX200 because you can put it on an IR flashlight mode and people can't see it, even though it does give you some kind of benefit. So this is the kind of build that I've been running. 58.5 ergonomics with 140 vertical recoil. You can still have the bipod with you if you want to, and there's not really even any disadvantage in having it out while you're running around either, which is interesting. All you take is the -1 ergonomics for having it there, so it does seem like pretty good to just take with you, just in case you get into a situation where it might be useful. Now, for reference, for these builds that I've done, I'm actually going to put these on DB for Tarkov, which is a really good website, and the developer has actually built a little section here so that I can upload various builds from my videos and have them linked there with the YouTube videos too. So go and check that out, go and see it over there. You can actually just go into Streamer and you'll be able to see the list of builds that I have for the various videos and like link back and stuff. So this is going to be quite a nice database and useful resource that I'm going to try to keep updated as I'm making stuff so that people can go and more easily look at exactly like what the build is without having to go and look into each individual video. And they've got the video there for reference, but it allows them to build it slightly more easily using DB for Tarkov as a reference point there. So I'm going to try to do that. You can go and check it out over there. Every single build variety that I put here today, you can kind of flick between them and see which one is different. So hopefully that's useful. The final part that I'm going to show you is the minimum recoil build, which is this one here. This one has 92 vertical recoil, so you can see the one that we did with 100 is actually pretty close to this. This one obviously has 0 ergo. It's got an RK2 on it. It's got an MT crosshair and a PRS Gen 3, and these are best in slot for recoil, but not best in slot for ergonomics. And with the recoil rework, Doesn't actually matter so much whether you're at 92 or 100 or whatever. I mean, my builds are a lot higher than this normally, 140 or so, because I'm using them in close combat. But if you're using them for sniping, you might want to reduce the recoil here. The bipod does actually help a lot. So you put the DRG L1 on this build as well, and then you can kind of get away with not really doing that much actually. So this is sort of not necessary anymore because of these bipods if you're using them in that kind of snipery way, because you're probably going to be at a long range, and you're going to be scoping out angles and maybe even using a spotter in a duo and stuff like that. But this is it just for reference. So yeah, here's the long and the short of it. For me, I've got these two builds, the Modernized version and the SAG MK1 version. The SAG one has higher ergo, so I tend to use this one for unsuppressed. The Modernized one has better recoil, so I tend to use this for suppressed. So how exactly do you get the bipod to work? Well, in order to use it, you have to deploy it first using the toggle bipod hotkey, and then when you are near a piece of cover, you then press the mount button. This shares a hotkey with the mount to a wall feature, which can be done with any gun, and if it's in the right position, it will connect your bipod to the terrain. One nice feature is that you don't have to disengage the bipod specifically to get out of that stance, you just have to move and it automatically detaches your bipod from whatever cover you've got it attached to. You can tell if it isn't working through a slightly too subtle graphic in the bottom left-hand corner next to your PMC's stance indicator when you press the button, where a red bipod icon shows up if the position isn't right to be able to do it. Using a bipod is the only way to mount whilst being prone, allowing you to, again in theory, set up in open areas to engage enemies. When it is working, this gives you a minus 80% recoil reduction. On the SVD, this turns it into an incredible laser beam monster, especially so given its semi-auto nature and absolutely staggering bullets, and it's why you can run no attachments whatsoever and still get incredible performance out of it. Unfortunately, so far I've really struggled to find a use for the bipod whilst playing in a roaming style, which is usually how I do it, because unless you know the map extremely well, it's too finicky to be able to work it out on the fly what you can and can't mount onto. Even in open areas, the angle range that is set when the bipod gets activated initially is quite tight. Horizontally, this is dictated by where you are facing when using it, but vertically too, this angle range is very noticeable. This means that often you don't have enough room to either look up or down enough to aim the weapon properly if the terrain is not perfectly flat. For playing a slower and more campy style though, getting angles on high traffic areas and predicting PMC pathing through listening to shots etc. could work if you are patient. As I said, I've just not encountered that many opportunities where it makes sense to be stationary, as this usually results in death. I tend to move around a lot and flank really hard, partly due to playing solo. So on to ammo. This has clearly undergone quite a shake-up in patch 15, with many rounds being banned off the fleet and some others being allowed back on. Not too much has changed for 7.62x54 itself, with both LPS and T46 being allowed on the flea market. But the one that did get banned this time around was PS, which is slightly higher up the penetration spectrum. By far the biggest change though overall to this caliber is the fact that M80 has been removed from the flea market for 7.62x51 NATO, and this matters for the SVD because it puts it on a relative basis in a very strong position. Now, whenever I mention M80, I get 10,000 people telling me that you could buy M80 on Ref 3, and this is certainly the case, but the SVD is still very strong in that intermediate period between level 15 and whenever you get to Ref level 3, depending on how much you play Arena. It's also really strong for those people who don't have Arena, so guys who are mostly on standard accounts are able to use the SVD and go toe-to-toe with players running something in the 7.62 NATO caliber. Between LPS and T46M themselves, there is almost no difference statistically between them at all, so the most important aspect is whether you want a tracer or not. I typically don't run the SVD at extreme ranges, so normally I just settle for T46M because people are going to hear me anyway normally when I'm firing at them. But if you are intending on being over 100 meters away, and especially when using the suppressed versions of the SVD, then LPS can be highly preferable. It is usually pretty expensive relatively on the flea market, being about 2 to 3 times as much as T46 because it's no longer purchasable from the trader, but you can make it workbench level 2 if you wish. Both of these cartridges are usually a 2-shot to the chest against PMCs wearing class 4 plates, but fare much less well against class 5, taking something like 3 to 4 shots to kill instead. PS can eventually be purchased from Prapor 4 himself after completing Punisher Part 6, the quest that most people actually use the SVD for in the first place, and probably the reason you're here. 7.62x54R BT can also be crafted in the workbench level 3 after Tarkov Shooter 7 if you want something that will punch all the way up to class 5 and 6 armor. 220 rounders is kind of the bare minimum for me these days, especially because of trader flipping, as they hardly go for much more than the trader value, so even if you don't have access, you can buy them off the flea for usually just a small fraction above what the trader sells them for. I think it's definitely worth taking the bigger mags with you for more shots, as 10 really isn't that many, especially if you come up against someone with class 5 armor on, and especially if you fight them at point blank. So next up, let's have a look at how the SVD has performed in some of my recent raids. Risky time for BRB with about 2 mils worth of gear. That's alright. Okay, so... No, I wonder where the safest place to go is here. I saw someone already. Hopefully they're going in. Like, are people still camping Marathon? Like, how many people are actually trying to do Marathon now? I can't imagine it's even that many. They're doing like shooter-born or something? Problem is that I'm running tracers here. So, can you mount it on the tree? I could one direction, but I can't seem to anymore. And bide our time. Finally. Paid off. No, I didn't see anybody else, so I think that they're on their own. I mean... Is it worth coming and grabbing the gear? I mean, I don't know, man, but like... You'll plant your gazelle first? Yeah, I should do that. Just gonna go for it. Ah! There's a scav right there. There's two literally in front of me. There's one behind the tree on the left and one right in the middle with a blue helmet. Okay. I heard a noise from him. I don't know whether he died. Did he die? What do you think, guys? Come on, baby. I did say I wanted scav kills. Do we got 5 seconds here? Yeah, we can plant it. We got it. Wood noise is intensifying. This dude here. Hey. Pretty solid M4. Part of another video. Sorry, part of another... It was part of another, yeah, part of another topic. It was the one about... Oh my god. Talk about spawn points. Let's go sit here for a sec to get my stamina back. That was someone else. Ah! No! Right, going to get around this corner and we're going to use a freaking CMS. Oh god, I'm at 0 hydration. Actually, that's going to hurt me. Don't know if that's going to... Oh yeah, I think I've actually just wasted this, but... Let's see. It depends when the ticks of damage come in. Come on. Come on. Oh, crap! Yeah, it was so close. It's like, come on, open the lid. Well, you lose a CMS charge when you cancel in the middle. Is that an Uzi or something? Where did he go? Dude just vaporized. Did you get the weekly done yet? Oh, I actually haven't. I should run some scavs in between. Where the frick did he go? He just like beelined it. I'm hoping that it's... Oh, I blew my colour. Could have been better. Aimed mainly at his legs, but... Let the recoil carry us up to his head, baby. This is one of those ones. I can never remember exactly which signal it is. I think it might be this one. We'll just triple check. I think that's the one you have to touch on the first time, and then there's one you have to go to the second one. This one, I think. Here it is. Anything going on up here? It's running. What a time to hit rock, eh? I'm actually going to try and flank him. I do think it made sense to try and disengage. Don't know what that guy was running, but probably an M4 or something. It was little old me with the SVD. Not really perfect unless you like get into a good spot. That's another scabby. The Punisher's not even my priority. I need to get into the general. Oh my god! People will stay for all eternity. I don't know. I think I might have killed that guy. I still think I might have killed him. Well, that's made it sound like AI. I just know that there's another AI scav right behind the thing. I think that's what the scav was doing. Like, but those shots were either a player or like a rogue AI. Like scavs don't shoot like that. And I know that there's no rogues or anything up there. So it has to be another player. But you just don't get that kind of like laser beamy kind of like. That's a scav. That's a packer in a like Ratnik helmet. Right, I've had to give away my position. We're just leaving. We're just leaving. I'm not a big resort player, so I tend to avoid it. Oh yeah, because this guy I killed at the beginning. Yeah, we did kill the second guy. Oh, that's why it was 5. Because I killed the guy with the RPD. I was really confused and thought I'd like miscounted because I only have 3 kills in my files. Because like I organized my files by like number of kills and like which weapon, and I was like, I only have 3. Why do I have 5 kills for Punisher? But I should have thought that made sense because this guy, level 49, been grinding this guy, and then I did kill this other person here at some point. I was gonna go check, but then I got shot at by their friend. But you know, we had a full rest of our raid to do whatever, and they probably sat there like a little gremlin, guarding their friend's body for the entire rest of the raid. Enjoy camping your mate. Like, I don't even want their gear. Like, most people are running class 4. It doesn't matter. The guy's like got UN helmet on. Like, well, what could he possibly have that I actually want? As usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.